So I wanted to make a recording about time-lapse tutorial with the image of bean. And so the topic of that one, or maybe I should just go into it. Hi, I'm AJ Alper, and I'm an olive prima portrait painter. And today's time-lapse tutorial, I wanted to talk a little bit about self-imposed restrictions as a learning tool. And I'm currently starting to put a restriction on myself, which has to do with the amount of time that I give myself to do a painting. This is a way that I can break myself out of a particular habit or try to improve certain aspects of my painting, which I think is really important. One is to liven up and to give a little bit more vitality to the work by leaving a lot of the areas of the painting fresh, or I would say unresolved but unfinished, or less finished, to show more of the process, the painterly brushstroke style that I use. What I had been doing is sometimes my paintings would get into 6, 8 hours, 10 hours of something that was initially supposed to be a style that was more sketch-like with the paint. And by putting on a self-imposed restriction, I am solving a few problems at the same time. One is that I increasingly have less time to do my artwork, and if I can complete a painting within 2.5, 3.5 hours, then that'll allow me to more readily start a painting, and it will allow me to do more paintings. The other stone that I'm killing is that of loosening up my work quite a bit. A downside to that is that there'll be, in a way, a perceived drop in overall quality of the work. And when I say quality, I mean the level of finish that may have intrigued some people to follow me, follow my Instagram channel, and maybe follow me on YouTube initially. But I think I'm after something that's a little more important, which is not to say to sacrifice quality, but to give myself the ability to get more quickly to the essence of what it is that I'm trying to paint. And so in that way, I would be creating a overall higher quality piece in the end. So this idea of putting self-imposed restrictions on yourself as an artist is one that goes back a long time. There's artists, I can think of several artists who have done this, and there's 3 of my favorites is Sargent, Sorolla, and Zorn. Zorn is famous for giving himself a limited palette. In that way, restricting the number of colors on his palette, in a way, freed himself up to paint both more quickly, and also to more easily find color harmony in his work by lessening the chance that colors would fight against each other, and then he would have to work to bring his paintings back into harmony. By having a limited palette, he already started off with his paintings by nature being more harmonious. The challenge for him then became how to get certain color contrast, certain color quality with a limited palette, and that forced him in a way to work even harder in that regard. He had a Prussian blue, typically a strong red, and something like a Naples yellow, and then a black, and a white. And so with those 5 colors, he would have to create all of the colors that he wanted to create. Occasionally, it's noted that, and some scholars have noted that there are occasions in his paintings where he expanded his palette to get a particular color. I would assume if there was an article of clothing that had a particular color, or there was a quality of light that he wanted to get, then he may have added a color or two to reach those. But overall, he was able to get all of the colors that he wanted from that limited palette. Another example of self-imposed restrictions is an interesting story about, and not just self-imposed, but I guess Sorolla in this case would have imposed this restriction on one of his students. There was a young artist who came from a wealthy family, and they felt that her work was not was becoming rather staid, not developed as much as they and she would like. She was going to a traditional French art schools in the école system of painting, which had very rigorous academies of painting and drawing from the figure. You would start by learning anatomy and drawing very long standing full figure poses, and then from there you would move on to painted figure, but in a very rigorous fashion. And her work, in a sense, felt kind of staid, especially at the time when artists were were painting more loosely and with much more vivid color, as in the Impressionists. And so her father felt that she should go study under Joaquin Sorolla. And Joaquin Sorolla took her under his wing. He didn't particularly like students, but he did like students that came from wealthy families that could pay him well. Those are the kind of students that he liked. And so I like to think of this as a little bit like as the inspiration for the Karate Kid. And you'll see why in a minute. When he started working with her, and he was famous for painting these huge canvases, these seascapes with boats, sailboats being pulled in by oxen, and these canvases were like 12 by 20 feet. They're huge, and I can't even imagine where they would get the canvas wide enough to be able to stretch these canvases in one piece of cloth. Maybe they were sewn together strips of canvas. Anyway, she got in working with him, and instead of working in his studio on large paintings, they went out every day to the beach, and they would work on these color studies. And when I say color studies, these were small, maybe 4 by 6 inch paintings, and with big brushes. And they would go out and they would do an hour to 45 minutes. They would do a quick sketch, maybe less time, 20 minutes, just trying to capture the quality of light. And there was no detail in these paintings. They were just maybe a bunch of very broad brush strokes. And he would have her do 10 to 20 of these a day, straight for maybe a month or 2 months. No large canvases, no detail, no perspective, nothing, no painting figures. This was just these color studies. And what I like to think of as Sorolla playing the part of Mr. Miyagi, and this young woman being the Karate Kid, and he was having her wax on and wax off these little color studies over and over again until her color sensibility became so finely tuned that when she went back to finally doing her own paintings, they were so filled with impressionistic color, of life and color temperature, and color sensibility, that it just completely broadened her work and brought it to another level. And this is because of this self-imposed restriction of doing these small color studies that were never meant to be finished painting, but only as a tool to get her painting to another level. There's also the story of John Singer Sargent, who was so enamored with the Impressionists and painted along Claude Monet, but didn't really have a total sense of Impressionism in his work, because his work was his work was grounded more in the realist tradition of France, and I think he admired their work to a degree that he tried to figure out how to bring that into his own work. So he knew that the Impressionists didn't have black in their palette, as an idea that that there was light in everything that you could paint, and black was the opposite of light, and you could achieve a sense of light and shadow with all the other colors in the palette, and you could get some of the darker colors by mixing transparent complementary colors together. You could get something akin to a black, and some call that chromatic black. And so he tried to paint without black, but he found himself rather frustrated and unsuccessful. But on a more ambitious painting, he decided that he was going to set up a scene that happened in the twilight hours of the evening, where a couple of girls were playing in a field of calla lilies with Japanese lanterns lit, so it was still light enough in the day that you would see the scene, but you would also see the glow of the lanterns. And to achieve this painting, he restricted himself to paint much like the Impressionists would do at times, at the same time every day. Claude Monet is famous for having, when he painted at Giverny, working on 20, 30 canvases at the same time, and then when the light was a certain way at a certain spot, he would have his assistants drag out the canvas that he was working on that spot to be able to continue working on that painting. What was unusual about John Singer Sargent's painting was bringing in that the element of having the two girls and having them pose over a month period of time at that particular point in day, and to only work on that canvas in that way at that time, in that season, with those figures, painting more in a realism style, but also trying to get that sense of impressionism, that quality of light that occurs at that certain time. And forcing himself to use that restriction was, in a way, becoming a student of the light in that particular moment. And so, a little bit different than the Impressionists, but some of the same ideas. And so with that in mind, I feel that he learned something that Zorn learned a lot by mixing with his limited palette, and Sorolla was picking up a lot about color and light by doing, over his lifetime, maybe thousands of these little color studies. And of course you can see the impact of those color studies had on his much grander paintings, with his ability to paint with a sense of light that made you feel the temperature of the light, as opposed to just copying maybe just the colors that he saw, but creating that illusion of light. And only that can come from doing those 1,000 little studies. So with that in mind, I am restricting myself to much shorter periods of time to do my work, so that I can produce both more work, which I find the most of the learning process in my work happens towards the beginning of the painting. Towards the end of the painting, it's more of a refinement period, and while I do learn a lot by resolving the painting, I feel like by doing many more paintings that I get more starts, that I'm going to learn more faster by doing that. And so with that, I challenge you to think about ways that you might restrict certain things in your working process to, in a way, make it harder for yourself, but at the same time force yourself to learn something more quickly. So if that's the case, if you can think of a way that you might limit your color or limit your materials or limit the structure in which you're working or your time frame, in my case, please leave a comment below and let me know what you're doing. Thanks. Later, the painting that John Singer Sargent painted was called Carnation, Lily, Rose, in naming the flowers that were in the painting. He later, in a self-deprecating style, resented or disliked the painting that he produced. He would often refer to it as, instead of Carnation, Lily, Rose, he would call it Darnation, Silly Pose, which I find just delightful. Anyway, thank you.